All right, so let's begin with the most basic backup type that is supported by Velero, that what I would call the basic resource backups. In this type of the backup, so it's essentially the backup for all the resource specs, right? All the YAML specs, but Velero backs them up as JSON. But it essentially takes all the resources that you selected. I mean, you can select in various different ways, by namespaces, by labels. Even you can even select by specific resource types. You might want to back up only PVs and PVCs, pods, secrets, config maps, so you can give that list, and Velero will pick only those resources and get the spec of all those resources, bundles them up, and uploads them to the object store, right? In this webinar, I'm going to go back and forth between a couple of different ways of showing you things. We will go to the terminal. Here, if I want to show how to create, how to create backups, how to run backups, and things like that. For example, to create the this basic backup, right? So this is how I created in my own environment. So I'm using the storage location. This is the backup storage location I created. By the way, I'm going to use DigitalOcean Spaces as the object store for the purpose of webinar today. Here I'm explicitly saying I'm not interested in snapshots, so I'm setting it to false. And I am not selecting any particular resource, which means that Velero is going to back up all the resources in all the namespaces on the cluster. I mean, I already ran this backup, right? So as you can see here, basic backup completed. And let's quickly go and see what is included in that. Right, so describe details, basic backup, and now this is going to tell you exactly that is included in this backup. As you can see here, I'm including all the namespaces. I haven't excluded anything, right? So here you can see the full list. Essentially, Velero picked up all the resources on this cluster, right? And there are no snapshots, as you can see here. And I will also, I want to show you the Velero documentation in this regard. If you go to the Velero website and documentation, there is this page called resource filtering. This is talking about all the different ways that you can include or exclude different resources. So there are a lot of options. So I don't want to go through all of them in the interest of time, but you can easily check this page and it will tell you. So you have a lot of control on what resources to include, what resources to exclude, right? From this page, you can get all those details. But I do want to mention one quick thing though. So by default, Velero is not going to include all the cluster resources in the backup. It will include some cluster resources, essentially some of them which are needed for other resources in the selection. But other than that, it's not going to include everything unless you use one of these two options. You can, when you create the backup, you can use include cluster resources, or more recently introduced option, which gives you more control, include cluster scoped resources, right? With the latter option, you can explicitly set what cluster resources you want to include. But I would personally prefer the first one because I really want to include everything in my backup, right? If I want to select something, I want to do it at the restore time, I want to be more selective. But typically during the backup time, I really want to select as much as I can. And for that reason, I do recommend that you use include cluster resources when you create the backups. And by the way, when I'm showing this backup create commands, even though I'm saying Velero backup create, everything, all the options I talk about, they all apply to Velero schedules as well, right? So you can easily do Velero schedule create and with the same options, and that will work. Okay, and this is the basic resource backups. I would also want to show what you will see on the object store, right? This is my, like I said, I'm using DigitalOcean Spaces. This is my bucket, and I'm using the prefix demo1. So all the files will be created under this prefix in the bucket. And Velero will create a folder called backups, and in that you see basic backup. And here you're going to see a bunch of compressed files, right? They are going to contain they contain the resource specs of various resources that you selected in this backup. All right, that is about resource backups. Again, it's very important to recognize here that PV data is not backup. This is only resource specs no persistent volume data is going to be part of this type of the backup. And also another important point is this is the baseline for all the other types of backups. Everything else that I will talk about, the file system backup, the snapshots, or even the other recent backup, snapshot data mover backups, all of them are going to be done on top of this. So whatever backup type that you select is always going to include the resources selected, just like you have seen in the object store just now. So this will be there all the time. Whatever backup type you select, this is going to do. Velero is going to include all this information, but it will do more depending on the type. For example, if you're doing the snapshot type, Velero is going to take the snapshot of the PVs in addition to all the other resource specs, right, as I described.